I've made a post before, but as usual, I'll give a bit of backstory and context. I work in a retail computer store. I am a part-time technician but also deal with customers with regards to sales, etc. So a while back we had this entitled mother and kid coming in to buy a new computer for her entitled kid. We discuss some options in their price range and end up selling a mid-range gaming computer. This happened on a weekend as it was the only time I ever worked, as I was part-time. Fast forward to next week. I come into work the morning seeing the entitled kid's rig on the table by the other tech work. It was a very specific rig that I built myself, so I recognized it. My work colleague calls me over, seeing as I was the only avid gamer in the shop, and tells me that this is my baby, seeing as I sold the entitled kid the rig and I would know how to fix some game related issues. Little did I know at the time that he was avoiding the screaming banshee and rather passed the work on to me. I didn't mind working on it at all because I could have some fun while working, as I had to test why the game wasn't working on EK's computer. I had to play the game until it crashed and try to figure out what was wrong. The game in question was Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Online. This happened during the early release of the game, and being a free-to-play game there were bound to be bugs. The first few times the game crashed on startup, sometimes mid-match and other times just refused to even start. About an hour into testing the computer, the entitled mother storms in. I don't exactly remember the dialogue as this was a few years ago. The entitled mother is basically already shouting at me about the useless computer I sold her. At this point I am trying to explain to the entitled mother why the game isn't working, as I still haven't gotten a clue myself yet, as many other people are having the same problems. She wasn't having any of it. She told me to refund her for the computer as we sold her useless trash that the entitled kid can't use anymore. She was red in the face when I told her, first off, our store has a no refund policy which you can clearly see on the wall behind me, and secondly, there is nothing wrong with the computer we sold you but rather the game itself is broken. It was after I made it clear that the game wasn't working that she then requested a refund for a free-to-play game. It turns out that the entitled brat spun some story about how he bought a game, to which I thought he bought in-game currency, only later realizing he actually bought hacks. Story for another time in another subreddit. Help please. She was livid that we never made it clear that there is a no refund policy and practically stormed out. Eventually, after a whole day of working on it, I got this game to work, not for long, because 23 weeks later a new update got released and the game broke again. Lo and behold, the entitled mother is screaming at me again for the broken game, which turned out to be the entitled kid being banned for hacking. But as I mentioned, a story for another time. I had been working on this computer for a full day and she was furious when I told her that the hours of labor I worked on would only cost her 17, which was very cheap considering. She basically stated that the computer was garbage and that it should have worked on day one. She eventually paid and left the store, never to return again. Haha. I wish. On our next stock take we noticed 2 game cases missing from our shelf. We only recently started selling games. But I came up with a system to store the game discs in a holder in the back with numbers attached to the game case, or sometimes in the game case in case of any attempted theft. I am not sure if the entitled mother and the entitled kid decided to try and steal a game from us without us noticing, or if some other kid snatched them not knowing the discs were in the back, but I really do hope it was that entitled kid, realizing his mistake afterwards that we kept the games in the shop. I wish that they would have come into the store complaining about buying a game without the disc included. That would have made for a good story, but whoever attempted to steal it is now left with an empty case. Side note, any seed keys or game keys were also removed. Not as satisfying, but this was one of my run-ins with a mildly entitled mother and her little gremlin of an entitled kid.